Hi everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, and I'm joined with Connor.
Hey guys.
We are going to talk about Black Mirror Season 2, Episode 1. It's called Be Right Back. Full spoilers for the episode, and of course this is our fourth retrospective Black Mirror review, because Season 3 is coming next month, and we're covering all the old episodes. So, this is the first one of the show that I hadn't seen before. I'd seen Season 1 before.
Alright, so we're on level footing now.
We're on level footing. This was my first experience with this episode. And this stars Hayley Atwell and Domhnall Gleeson, which is interesting because, she had already been in Captain America 1 by this point, so she, I guess, was already kind of well known. Whereas Domhnall Gleeson became like a house. Well, I wouldn't say he's a household name. I don't think regular
He's
people
getting there though, isn't he?
know who he is. But I think for people like us, like last year, he was an Ex Machina, the Revenant in Star Wars. Like, he's getting around.
He is. I think he's getting up there. I mean, I think a lot of British people knew him just for his family connections. So you see his name and you know who he is.
Yeah.
But like when this came out, even because this was what 2013.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we probably would have known roughly who he was back then, but not to the extent of today.
I would have recognised his last name, but I probably wouldn't have known him.
Yeah, that's the thing. You'd have gone, oh, okay, you know who he is because of that.
Yeah. Well, I might not have known, but I thought, oh, is he related to him? Like, it would have been a question in my head, which may or may not have been true. But, so this episode is about them as a couple, and he dies in an accident. We don't actually see that; it happens off screen, but you can just assume that it was a car crash or something like that, and it leaves her on her own. And the sort of the metaphor in this episode is really about like someone's lasting like impact after they're dead because of all the material they've left on social media. Kind of like how in the olden days it was just pictures, so you just have like family photos of them, whereas now you've got all of their tweets, all of their Facebook posts, everything they've put on like.
Yeah.
And again, it's heightened because it's science fiction. It's set in the near future.
The other metaphor is the idea of prioritizing online relationships over physical interactions with people.
Yeah, that's there too, certainly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so he dies, and she's left alone, and she's like, crying her eyes out, and upset. And her friend at her funeral, or not her funeral, his funeral, really awkwardly tries to force this new thing on her, this new service she can sign up for, which basically takes all of his like tweets and Facebook posts and all that, and creates like an artificial intelligence version of him that'll talk to her, through text and stuff like that. And she's reluctant; she doesn't want to do it until she realizes she's pregnant. And that sort of is the driving motivation that makes her go, right, I'm going to answer this. I need to tell him that I'm having a baby. So this will act as that.
Do you know what's a little weird?
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like that we're that far off from this technology already.
Yeah, this one feels a bit more closer to...
Maybe not
reality.
to quite the same extent, but the first part, the online, like the chat window stuff.
Hmm.
I don't feel far, like...
Alright, well, once we get to the body thing that morphs into him, sure. Like, we're not there.
Yeah, we're nowhere near that. But the idea of having interactions with an artificial intelligence based off someone who's no longer there doesn't seem that implausibly far away.
It's still a terrible idea.
I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm saying we're not far from it anyway.
We have to let things go. This is just unhealthy, like talking to someone who's kind of like a weird amalgamation of that person, but not really them. Which is really what she learns over the course of the episode. Eventually, is that it's not real, and like she has to let it go. She gets very attached though, because like when she's talking to him, when she goes to get her sonogram, and she drops the phone and she starts panicking because she thinks she can't talk to him anymore. Even though I'm thinking the entire time, wait, wouldn't it just be like on her computer at home as well, and like whatever else?
Yeah.
And sure enough, he says, "I'm on the cloud. Don't worry."
Yeah, but it's the idea that she's just worried. She doesn't think, because I'm sure she probably knows that really if she'd thought about it.
Yeah, she's just like panicking. She's just lost her husband. She's having a baby. It's like a really, like a roller coaster of like things happening to her in such a short span of time. Like her head's just not there.
Aye.
And quite right. The only other futuristic thing in the episode is the fact that her like sort of graphics tablet drawing thing that she uses for
Mm.
like her artwork or whatever she does.
Yeah.
She's a designer or something like that, but she uses this like really weird curved graphics table thing, which is quite cool.
Again, seems plausible though.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I've seen footage of tables that are like the entire table like a touchscreen.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you can do all that kind of thing. But obviously it's not consumer level yet, so it's
No.
still in the future. So that's kind of where we're at with all that. And then he suggests, look, you can take this one step further. We can, you know,
So you don't even need to know what's coming. Like what you because he never says it. It just cuts to black, but you know exactly what's going on.
yeah. And she gets this big package, and she gets like this like thing that doesn't really look like him, but it's like a body, and there's like instructions to put it in a bath and like put this like salt stuff in the bath with him, and like let it cook. Basically, let it
Pretty
cook
much.
for 10 hours or whatever it is, and then he steps out and it's him. It's like, it's the actor again, and he's playing her husband. Although they brought up an interesting touch is that he feels weird because a lot of the minor detail is actually just drawn on.
Yeah,
Because she says he's really smooth, and it's because like the pores and the fingerprints and stuff like that are just like 2D details that are just like printed on rather than actually being there,
yeah.
which I thought was odd.
It is odd.
It's very odd. My cat's been very noisy. It wants outside. Connor, continue.
Okay, so it gets a bit weird at this point, I think, because this is where she starts really developing the relationship with the person. Instead, it's a physical being rather than just a voice on a phone.
Yeah.
So this is where before it's like maybe it's a somewhat unhealthy but a coping mechanism all the same.
Now it's creepy.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Yeah. So right, almost immediately it gets to what about sex? Can she have sex with this thing? And as much as I'm not complaining about Hayley Atwell taking her top off,
I will never complain about that.
by the way, can I just say that this episode is very much like a ray of hope for gingers everywhere, because this ginger person gets to have sex with Hayley Atwell, and I'm just thinking like maybe you were watching this thinking, oh, this is an uplifting episode.
Do you know what? I was trying to put my finger on what it was that I liked so much about this one. I think you might have just hit the nail on the head.
Although I do want to point out that during said sex scene early on in the episode, there's a lot of apologising coming from him, which I feel is a very realistic portrayal of how a ginger has sex. I just want to point that out there.
Just every ginger's the same to you, isn't it?
No. You're all varying levels of disappointing.
Oh, okay. This is fair enough.
Some of you are worse than others. But yeah, so there's this really awkward scene where she like takes his hand and puts it on her boob, and she's like, "Why are you not reacting to this? Like, my self-esteem's not exactly doing well here. Like, why are you not?" And she's like, "Does this work?" And she like touches his crotch, and he's like, "Oh, I can turn that off and on. It will." But it's very unnatural. Everything's very like phony. And the weird thing is then the sex scene happens, and you see that it's really good for her. Because he's essentially a machine, so he just keeps doing it, and in every single thing, it seems like she's really getting a lot out of it. And the funny thing is it almost feels like a negative, because early on, I joked about the scene where he's apologizing. It almost feels more fake because he can't get tired, or finish early, or he can't mess up.
Nothing can go wrong. It's just perfection almost.
Yeah, so it's weird to say that that's like a tell sign to her that he's not real, but it is, because the imperfections aren't there.
Yeah, it's because he mentions that none of his sexual information was available to him because he didn't talk about it online. So he has no idea of knowing. But I wonder if he had talked about this, if he'd mentioned, "Oh, I finished early tonight," something like that. If that was online, would it have finished early? Just to maintain the realism.
Yeah, possibly. It's an interesting question. Of course, she then starts to get creeped out because he's just kind of around all the time, and he doesn't really have anything that he does other than things for her.
Yeah, it's when she's trying to do her work and he just comes in and is like, "Do you want anything?" He's like, "No." Cake, coffee.
And the real turning point is when her friend comes over finally and
It's a
notices.
sister.
Is a sister, sorry. And she notices that there's men's clothes in the bathroom because she's hiding them. She doesn't want her to know that he's there. Like, because try explaining this to your friends and family.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I'm glad you're finally moving on. This is good for you." And that's kind of when it hits her that it's really not real because she's not moving on. It's the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, she's stuck.
Yeah. So this is when she tells him to get out the house, and he's still there the next day, and she takes him out to this romantic spot they had, which was introduced earlier on in the episode when she was just listening to him on the phone. A lot like the movie Her, by the way. There was a couple of scenes in there reminded me of that movie.
I was very much thinking of it as well. I think it's hard not to.
Yeah. And it was this point out where, and she, from earlier on in the episode, they told this story about how lovers used to come out here to commit suicide or whatever, because there was like a sort of cliff face that went out to the ocean, and she tells him to jump, and he doesn't like react. He's like, "Are you sure?"
I think my favorite part is just before when she says he would have figured out what was happening, because it's like we figured it out as an audience.
Yeah, we know what she's about to make him do.
Yeah, and it's that whole idea that we're real enough to understand, but this thing can't.
Yeah. Again, this is not real, this is fake.
Yeah.
Which is why it has to end. And once she says that he would cry, he would beg, he would say please don't, he then starts crying and begging and saying please stop. And she's like, "This is not fair, don't you do this?" And
Yeah.
and then it cuts to black, and I'm like, where's it going? Now we cut like 5-6 years later because our daughter is like,
Yeah, maybe 7 or 8. I don't know.
yeah, it could even be later, but it's a good chunk of time because the daughter's there now, and because before she didn't even have a belly, like she was pregnant, but she wasn't even showing yet.
She was like first trimester.
Yeah, and now she's got a daughter who's like 7, and so daughter's birthday, they're splitting cake, and we find out that she's hiding him in the attic. She's got him in the attic, and our daughter can go and see him on the weekends. And this comes back to a discussion they had when he was still alive, back at the start.
I loved this touch, yeah.
Because he mentioned that his mother, I think he had like a brother who died when they were kids.
Yeah.
And after the brother died, she removed all the photographs of him and put them in the attic. And then the same again when his dad died, her husband, all the photographs went in the attic. So it's this idea that she's doing the same thing as her. And it was comparing how... And it was like I said, how I even mentioned at the start when I described what the metaphor of this was how much like photographs of old, like social media is the new, like this is what's around when someone's died, like all this stuff still exists, and she's kind of putting that in the attic out the way.
I think it was particularly interesting because the last scene with him in the house, he picks up, the picture that when they have that conversation, he talks about this one picture that she didn't put away, but it was like fake.
Yeah.
And he picks it up and is like, "Oh, this is nice," because this version of him doesn't know the story, doesn't understand it's surface level. It doesn't have the implications of everything.
Really, really over the top with the ginger hair in that picture as well, might I add.
All ginger kids are like that. Trust me, you should see some of my kid pictures. You think this is ginger now? Oh boy, it was so much brighter.
It wasn't even just that; it was the shape of it as well. It was just this ball of ginger,
That's every ginger child.
When did it go curly then?
Probably mid-teens.
Okay, that was just part of puberty.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it would have been before, but I never really grew it out that long. It was not. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the lesson of this episode, in all honesty, is that, you know what, when a ginger in your life passes away, count your blessings and just let them be gone.
Yeah. That seems accurate.
In all honesty though, to sort of review the episode, which is what we've been doing the whole time, but to actually like give an appraisal or whatever of it, this is probably my least favourite of the episode of the show so far.
Interesting.
And I was wondering when that was. I didn't dislike it. Obviously, it was still good. It was still, quality storytelling. It was just, I think, I don't know. I just wasn't feeling the characters quite as much as I think the previous ones.
See, this is interesting because I was gonna say I think this might be my favorite one yet
Oh, this is interesting. All right, go on.
because
Why?
I feel like it's toned down a little bit from the first season.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite as extreme, but I also feel the metaphors are a little bit more subtle, and it allowed the story to breathe a bit more, and that worked for me. Like I feel like if you go back to some of the episodes in the first season, I thought that the metaphors were a little overly heavy-handed, whereas with this, it worked more for me with the situation.
I wonder if my enjoyment in this was affected by the fact that it was very similar. See, once like he came up as like a not a robot, but you know whatever the new version of him was,
Yeah.
it reminded me a lot of another British show from last year or 2 years ago now called Humans.
I know the one. I never got around to watching it.
Like it was really reminiscent, and it had a very similar feeling to that.
Right. So now it kind of feels, even though this was before, feels a little bit derivative.
It's not even that it feels derivative. It's just that I had a very similar kind of detached feeling to that show as well.
Mm,
So it almost just reminded me of that feeling,
fair enough.
and I just wasn't like I wasn't super into it. Like I think it probably lost me once we got like a fake. See when it was like her and it was just like talking to him in the chat and the phone.
Mm.
I liked it a lot more. Once they introduced like a fake version of him, I wasn't as into it. Excuse my cats knocking things over in the background.
Damn things.
Yeah. Continue.
Menaces.
I'm just
Menaces. I bet it's the ginger one, isn't it?
probably is. It's always a ginger one.
Yeah, no, I really like I say, I thought while the metaphors are still there, and obviously it's still about that, it felt more subtle than the last couple. Maybe not the very first one, but it's definitely episode two, because episode two just was all metaphor. Episode three, I still felt was a bit in your face compared to this, and this just it allowed everything to breathe a bit more. I connect to the characters more than I did in the others. But again, maybe that's just because he's ginger. So who knows?
Maybe.
Maybe I just like seeing myself on screen. I just like having that representation.
Oh god, I don't. No, it was still good, but I think I think maybe just the magic body that can morph into him, because it did feel like it was like very grounded in like technology we could have soon, kind of like you said at the start. But once they introduced this like thing that can morph into him, and it doesn't even need to eat, and because then I was like, well, it must need fuel of some kind. It's running, like.
It's on batteries, obviously.
True. Maybe, but they never bring that up. I don't know. It just felt a lot more far-fetched to me at that point, where it took me out of it just a little bit.
I get that.
And then the ending of like letting the daughter see him like at the weekends, I thought you're really fucking up the psychology of your daughter here. Like I wasn't really on board with that decision. I'm fully of the
Maybe.
opinion. I'm fully of the opinion that you should have jumped.
Fair enough. I do think the episode would have been better if it had just ended on that cut to black.
I thought it was. I thought it was just going to the credits were going to
I
come
did
up.
as well. I think that would have been better, but I like the idea of in the attic, the callbacks and stuff like that. And her struggling to go up and see it, even because I imagine when he was a kid and she put the pictures in the attic, he'd still go up and see them and look through the pictures, but the mother couldn't. It was too hard for her. Whereas I feel like the same things happened here at the end, where the daughter wants to experience the person that has gone,
Okay, sure.
but for
sure.
her, it's too hard.
Okay, I have nothing to add to it. I see what you're saying. I just think the concept of this fake
Just went a
person
little bit too far.
just didn't sit with me. Yeah, it was just that kind of niggling little thing where I'm just kind of like, I'm not feeling this. Like once there was a fake robot person there.
That's fair enough. I think there's always going to be stuff like that with anthologies.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So that's the first episode of season 2. We'll be back in a couple of days' time with the second episode. Of course, season 3 is coming next week, so look forward. Not next week, sorry, next month. So look forward to us reviewing all those episodes, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Tell us what you think of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. It helps us out a lot. Get us on Twitter at mild_fuzz. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.